Okay.
Now, if anybody,
3 buttons.
yeah, it's really echoing. Do you guys hear it echo?
Yes.
Yes.
Are we all there?
I'm going to take and just lower down my volume. And let's see if that makes it better. Now, can you still hear me?
Yes.
But there's so much, it's like I'm hearing you twice.
You need to mute everyone, Barb. Do you have a mute button? It's coming from a participant. Otherwise, we can all mute ourselves.
Barb, you have to mute yours. We'll get going here, guys. How old are we? 72. Good job.
Mine didn't go to mute.
Did you speak with Barb Anderson?
So we can't talk.
Why don't you go over and sit over by her over there?
Hey, Barb.
Although this is a virtual meeting, guys, we have a few people who are here in the community center that are also watching who don't have access necessarily. Yes, that's much better. And you guys can still hear me and nothing's echoing, correct?
Yes. Yes.
Okay,
May talk.
but we can still hear them. It's coming. I have a person here from the board of directors for the community center, and she's doing the technical stuff for us tonight. So, as I said, we're going to go ahead and get started with the program. So, we introduced ourselves. There's just a couple things I want to mention. We will still be holding a virtual meeting in March. So don't get confused. It might be here at the center if you see the lights on, but it's still going to be a virtual meeting. April, we're hoping to be back to normal without any problems, and everything will be here on site. If you have questions, you can put them in the chat for the information that Pam and I are presenting, or you can take and just hold them to the end and we'll take questions. We might not know the answers, but what we'll do is we'll have a list of them and we'll be able to research them and get the information back to you. Okay, so there's 3 goals, what we're hoping to accomplish with this program. First is the origins, if you think about it, for the Holmen Area Historical Society has always been to try and share pictures, to share stories, and have been sort of what we want to preserve and pass on to the next generations here. Actually it was April of 2020, we were asked to do a program for Good Morning Holmen. And that was the start of all of this. But then other people asked questions and said, gee, can't you do another one? Or what about this? Or what about that? And so we sort of tentatively started gathering some pictures, some stories, some information. And then, of course, when we withdrew the face-to-face, this was an opportune time to come in February to do this. So the second goal is to share information about some of the descendants of the 3 people, the settlers, the first 3 that were here in the town of Holland or in the very near area. Now, it's hard to know who was first. You know, you have to go by legal documents to find out who was first, who bought the land first, things like that. But we went with names that were in the Centennial Book to start with, and then other information that we were able to find. So the third goal is that we would like to share one of the donations that was given to the Holmen Area Historical Society. And we've been waiting and trying to figure out how to do this with COVID, but you will have the opportunity to see it online tonight. And it'll be at the very end when we're going to try and get this laptop and the camera to sort of cruise around and show you this display. Now, the older history has very few pictures, of course, because who had a camera? very few people had cameras back in the 1850s and 1860s. So what do we have to go by? We have things that were printed in newspapers that were published maybe weekly or monthly. We have stories from family members who have shared with us, and also from other historians that are just trying to keep the stories alive. So what I want to do now is I want to take and move on. You can see the slide correctly, am I right? The first slide?
Up there on top.
Okay. So with the town of Holmen Settlers, some of the area around Holmen was settled much before anything was actually in the location of the village. Many of the areas settled roughly around the same time. So it depends where you lived or where your family lived as to when you think the first time was that they moved into this area. With a large area of land, it was kind of hard to transfer information because what did they have for transportation? They had horse, they had oxen, they were on foot, walking long distances. So each area around Holmen, you think of Long Coulee and Amsterdam Prairie and Halfway Creek, they all have their own stories based on the stories that were handed down from their family. And they might not all jive. And I'm going to tell you that from the beginning, because if you're one of these family members, and I saw that we do have some members from the Black family that are on, they might remember different stories depending on who told them those stories. We went by documents, and I went by one book that I'll explain later. We're only talking about these three families tonight, but there's many more that left their home countries to settle in the Holmen area. So the dates might be different, the stories might be different, but again, you gotta look at where the truth lies. The first family we'll talk about is the Gordon family. And they lived up on the northern edge of La Crosse County in the Council Bay area. That's where they settled first. And many of the documents that we looked at say that the Gordon family was the first one to come to this area. They were involved in logging and transportation. The second family that we're going to talk about is the Bonima family. And I'm going to say right now, if I mispronounce a name, don't shoot me. We have Dutch names, Frisian names, and sometimes it's kind of hard to know what letter is silent and what letter is not. It's sort of like the Spanish language. The Bonima family also initially settled in the northern and the western part of the town of Holland, but they played also a big part in the development of New Amsterdam, with the Bonima family purchasing a lot of land around New Amsterdam. And lastly, we're going to be talking about the Black family, who settled on Amsterdam Prairie and farmed the land. They supported hard work as carpenters and education, and a lot of the current Holmen area residents are descendants of either directly from the Black family or through marriage. More and more people that I've talked to say, well, I'm related to the Blacks, and I'm related to the Blacks. Well, my husband's related to the Blacks. I'm not. So the first family, as I said, is the Gordon family. Now, if anybody, I can't hear you, you're muted, but I'd like you to look at the first name of Mr. Gordon and see if you can even try to pronounce it. I'm gonna use his name as Lipalet. I did talk to a staff person that I used to work with who is of Dutch descent. And he said there are so many letters that are silent or sound like other letters of the alphabet that it's sometimes hard to know how to go ahead and pronounce it.
Barb,
Yes?
so distant relative of my mother, they pronounced it Eliflet.
Lifelet?
Eliflet.
Eliflet. Okay. I'll
Yeah.
pronounce it Ephilet. It's that's, remember, Betty, I'm a Polak.
No,
So
it's
the
fine.
Gordon family, as I said, was said to be the first settler around Holmen. So he came to this area in either 1849 or 1850. Initially, he was heading not here to the Holmen area, but he was looking to possibly relocate from New Hampshire to Oregon. He was not young. He was 48 years old, and he was traveling without his family. But he was a businessman, and he's traveled a lot already. He spent many years in the lumber industry in Maine, but after stopping at Oshkosh, first of all, that's where he thought that maybe he liked the property around there. Lots of trees, lots of pines, things like that. But then he kept coming this way, and he ended up by the Black River, and he saw all the trees and all the potential for logging there. History says he purchased 500 acres, largely wooded, and it was on both sides of the Black River. So not only in La Crosse County, but also in Trempealeau County. Supposedly, he obtained river rights to be able to float his logs down the Black River all the way from Black River Falls down to the mouth of the stream. He was a man of considerable means. He had lots of money. He was able to purchase in both counties, and although land was not that expensive back then, it still cost him a pretty penny to be traveling all over the place. Piles of logs were cut both for transport and for building homes. And he then headed back to New Hampshire to get his wife and 3 children. And these stories came out of newspaper articles. That's where we found most of these. Only thing, he got sick on his return to New Hampshire. And when he did get back there, he was close to dying. He talked with his wife. He explained what his dream was to start out here in La Crosse County and build a big logging industry. And we know that that's what everybody was doing back then. But he died. And so she promised him that she would follow his dream. And so she headed out to Wisconsin with 3 children. Would you like to do that at this point with all the transportation? No, but she did it. She didn't know where she was going, but she knew that her husband had purchased property and things were sort of underway in the area of the Council Bay area outside north of Holmen. So she went by railway, part of it, to actually Rock Island, Illinois. And the rest of the trip was by boat up the Mississippi to La Crosse and then overland north. Now, one of the articles says that the children were grown. So that would be a bigger help. But when we look in a little bit here at the census sheets, they were not grown adults. So I don't know how much help they actually were. The wood that had been set aside by him for building a house had actually built houses around the area. And so she got here and there was not that much wood like he had explained to her. And she also had difficulty establishing that claim on the Black River, which said he was the only person to be able to float the logs down. So that had to go by the wayside also. But one thing she did do, whether it had started beforehand or after she got here, is she started the first ferry that went across the Black River, and that was the Gordon Ferry. So if we look at an old plat map, and this plat map is from 1874 of the town of Holland. And if you look right up at the very top where it says Black River written there, I don't think you can see my mouse if I move my mouse around on here. Can you see it moving?
Yes.
Perfect. P.N. Gordon over to the right of where the mouse is, right in there. Pam's my mouse person, so that's Polly. So the land had been transferred over to her name. And so her property sat right up there on the river. This map does not show Trempealeau County land ownership. It just shows in the town of Holland. Now, just a heads up, the next name I said was Bonima. Notice who's living to the left. Epke Bonima. And if you look at other names that are on this old map, the Black is Ole Black. Grab this for a second, okay? Right here, he already had land that had been purchased here in 1874. But we're talking about him coming here in 1850 when he first came. So that's quite a time span from when he was first here and how the land can change. One other thing I want to point out here is notice how this road comes up and curves over. The current Black River Bridge is right where my pointer is. Their ferry was over here. And it was where the Boy Scout camp is now. So this property here that she owned was pretty much the Boy Scout camp. And then they had other land added to that. She also had land over here, which looks a little funny, but what I found in a lot of my readings was a lot of people had crop land. So it wasn't all trees, it was blowing grasses, and they used some of that grass to feed their animals, and they would hay out in these lower plots that they had down in the bottoms. Now, supposedly a second ferry also started before the McGilvery one, and that was located over here in this area because there was no bridge. So they couldn't get across the Black River over here to the left of Epke Bonima's property. So let's talk a little bit about Polly Nichols Kelly. Kelly was her maiden name. Polly was his wife. She must be pretty dedicated to follow through with his wishes after he died. I would have considered just staying where I was with those young children rather than making this trip out here. She also was an actual daughter of the American Revolution. And her grave site that's on the right-hand side there with her headstone was actually dedicated in 1941 for being that daughter of American revolutionists. She was born in 1805 in New Hampshire, and she died in 1900 in Wisconsin, and she's buried in the Decorah Prairie Cemetery. She was living with her son Daniel at the time of her death, and she died at 95 years of age. And that is totally unbelievable for that time to live that long.
Right.
She owned the Gordon Ferry, and she employed men from the area to operate it until her son could take the ferry over as she got older. And then again, I mentioned that from the maps, it appears that it was located more to the east of where the current Black River Bridge is. The ferry was essential because otherwise, how would you get to Galesville? How would you get to Trempealeau? And so it was very important that they had some form of transportation so that you didn't have to drive long distances or the treacherous river to get across. Unfortunately, we were not able to find a picture of the Gordon Ferry, and we tried, and I called some family members from the Gordon family, I thought. One person told me, no, he's not related, and another person never really called me back. So she is buried, Polly Nichols is buried in the Decorah Prairie Cemetery, and it's on the other side of the Black River. How many of you know where it's at? Everybody, there are a few people here in the room, very few, but they're shaking their heads. Nope, they've never been there. So the majority of her family and other descendants are buried in this cemetery. So if you've never been to that cemetery, here's a map. And I really think you should make a trip out there this spring to take a look at it. A good number of grave sites are Native American that are buried there, because who lived on Amsterdam Prairie? The Native Americans. And so they're there, Irvines are there, other family members from the Galesville area are buried there. It is not associated with a church. And so it is a cemetery that is taken care of very well by the Dockin family, and a lot of Dockins are buried in that cemetery. But don't blink or you're gonna miss it. Because all that's out there on Highway 54 is this little sign that says that it was established in 1862. And it looks like you're driving into a cornfield to get to it. But it is a very unique cemetery to go out there and look at the headstones. They keep it beautiful. So let's take a look at the 1870 census, because remember I said that we use censuses a lot to try and follow family lines and then find out who the descendants are by looking at their obituaries. You can sort of trace the story of their life. So here, Polly, and I'm going to take and point to Polly right here. She's 65 years old and she owns the house, I'm guessing, because it says she's keeping house and it shows how much the house is worth. Then comes Daniel, he's the oldest, his wife, and their children. So the children took care of their parents. And that's not always the case now with both people in the family working. But it was common back then. Of Daniel's wife, Anna, she has family that are still in the Galesville area. Anna's name was Irvine. And so they're still living up around that area. So who were some of the other descendants of the Gordons? And are they still living in the area? Well, as I said, you look at the census. So here's the next census down. And this one here, 1880, 10 years later. Is her name on there? Nope, it's Daniel, Anna, and the children. So you can sort of get an idea when a person has died, because there were no nursing homes back then. So you can kind of get an idea on an age date to help you with your search for the rest of the family. Then you look at obituaries, as I said, and you look to see who were the survivors, and you have to trace them. Or you look and call Barb Johnson, and a lot of people do that, and then I quickly will look some of them up. So the last one born was Dudley, and this is in reverse order. Of the Gordon family, Polly's kids that came with her, Dudley never married, but he did serve in the Civil War. And then there was Sarah, and Sarah married a Jacob Hoyt from the Galesville, Tremplow area. And the names changed a little bit. We have Harth, her children are Hoyt and Ewell. But we know that names changed and they added letters. So some of those names that I found were Ewells with an S on it. Daniel and Rosanna Irvine, pictures of them. Where do we find the pictures? You either find them on somebody else's family tree on ancestry.com, which is a paid site, or you go to findagrave.com like I did for Sarah, and you can find pictures that have been put out there of headstones. And maybe that's the only picture you have for them. If we look at Daniel's children, we have a last name of Henry. He also had a Dudley. And that's the other problem I've always found with searching family lines. Everybody names their kids successively the same name. So it makes it hard. You've got to get those birth and death dates in order to know who belongs to who. But Dudley actually married a Spangler. And we know that Spanglers currently are still living in the New Amsterdam area. Then you have Margaret Gordon Hanson. That was one of the Martin Hansons. And so, although we have probably 3 Martin Hansons in our Holmen area here, this was one of them. And then the last 2 boys. I have no information about them currently. If anybody wants to let us know some information about the Gordon family, we're more than willing to take it and pictures for the Historical Society. So as I said, they owned a ferry service. And so I just want to talk a little bit about that ferry service that they had. Now, if you get the La Crosse Tribune or the Holmen Courier, you've already seen this picture. It got posted this last week. And it was Steve Kedrowski who submitted it to the La Crosse Tribune. But this picture of the first bridge across the Black River, which is at the location of the ferry, has been out on the internet for quite a while. Now we have one with the Historical Society, but it is not as good as this picture. And it has a bunch of people standing on it, maybe for the dedication, and it's blurry. So we haven't taken the time to really go in and try and tune it up a little bit. So how good was the ferry? Well, we know the ferry was not that good. That's why they built bridges. Because the problems you have with a ferry is you are dependent on what's coming down the river. And so what was the industry? Logging. You have big strings of trees that are coming down the river and they get jammed up and then people can't get across the ferry. Or how about in the winter? In the winter, you have ice that maybe you got across without using the ferry, but now it melted and you can't get back. But where's the ferry? The other side of the river. In 1854, another ferry to span the Black River was built by McGilvray and Charles Utter. They built that on the streets of Trempealeau, and I'm not going to go into that story. That would be a whole nother hour. And there are people who are versed on that a heck of a lot better than what I am as to how they went about building that. The ferries functioned a little differently. One of the ferries used a cable system. That was the Gordon ferry. And then the other one, the McGilvray, you can look at their website and they have a beautiful history out there that will talk about how the ferries started and why the bridge was necessary there. Think how much time that cut off for those farmers. They didn't have to go from town of Holland to Galesville to get to Trempealeau. So you had bridges at that point in both directions. What were the rates? I'm just going to mention what the rates were for ferrying, and it certainly wasn't very much to go across. So it included a charge of 25 cents for a team of horses to go across the ferry, 35 cents for a 4-horse rig, and 10 cents for a foot passenger. But you can't always guarantee you're going to get back. Not that day anyway. In 1906 is when this plat map came. And what you're going to find here is that this is now D.K. Gordon. So Polly's dead at this point. And also the land that Bonima owned over here is now owned by a J. Johnson. And it really has filled in with population around this top area in this township. So let's move on and talk about the Bonima family. When we started doing this program, this was supposed to be a short little program. So I'm not sure how long we're going to last here, but I think it's not going to be as short as what we had hoped to be in January. You're lucky, you guys. Information about the Bonima family and many others from the Netherlands can be found in old newspapers, historical articles, and not only talk is really quite different than the Gordon. That really was a stressor for them. The historical articles talk about every little detail on what went wrong with their trip here. Now, the Bonima family is not large. You see 3 headstones. That's all I found. That was the original 3. So you have Epke, and he died in 1895. The interesting thing is that I found out that I found a marriage certificate to that lady, Siestra, and they were married in Alaska in 1856. Now, I didn't lay my eyes on it at the Register of Deeds office, so I'm not really sure, but I doubt that there are 2 people with the name of Epke Bonima at that time. But his second wife, and I can't find out what happened to her either, but his second wife was a Spangler, Louise Spangler. So those people lived in the New Amsterdam area. His brother came with him, and that was Harmon, and he died in 1892, and he never married. But Epke and Louise are buried together with the brother, and they're at Green Mound Cemetery. So again, findagrave.com is a good place to look initially. And then from there, you can go on the internet if you have access to certain sites. I did find his will, and the will stated that everything went to Louise, and they had no children. When looking for information, it's sometimes difficult to find the truth. You have to pick a source, and you have to believe that that one is the truth. So the 1906 plat map of New Amsterdam is the truth, right? Plat map published by the county or townships and stuff. And the thing that I found out was there are also numerous documents that are out there. In 1947, there's a very long one out on the internet that is part of the Wisconsin Magazine of History, and it was written by Henry Lucas. And it talks a lot about how they got here and the troubles they had and who came and who died en route. And some of the names are still here in this area, but they're not spelled the same. So they have the Dutch or the Frisian spelling. And what I found also was that the difference with Frisians are that they are more of German descent. That area of the country was over towards Germany. So what did Epke do to settle New Amsterdam? Well, first of all, he brought over a group of 86 to 92 Frisian farmers, and the economy was terrible over there. And so the goal was that he would help them get here to the United States. But his site where he really wanted to go was not town of Holland. His site was actually going to be somewhere else in Wisconsin. But he did pay their way. I found one article that said that others paid him back the cost of coming over on the ship. Now, they started having problems on the very first leg of their trip before they ever got to Liverpool, England. And in doing so, in 1853, it was delayed because of storms. So, you know, if you fly, if your trip is delayed, what do you miss? The next ship that's going out to come to the United States. So they ended up then getting on a different boat after waiting days with no money or little money, because they put the majority of their money, from what we've read, into belongings and didn't carry much money. They didn't have much money. He paid their way. Now, when they got to Liverpool, some of the Frisians and other people from Netherlands turned back. They were already disappointed, and they went back to the Netherlands rather than moving on. I don't know whether they tried again to come over. I didn't pursue that and looking for it. But think about it. These people had all the belongings that they owned with them. They got on a sailing ship. The sailing ship was a William and Mary. And this is just a replica. It looks like a drawing of what their sailing ship looked like. But it had a captain by the name of Stinson. And it not only carried immigrants coming to the United States, but also iron ore. The trip was fairly uneventful until the 3rd of May. And near Nassau, Bahamas, now think of this, where should they have gone? They should have went to New York. But they ended up down by Nassau, Bahamas. So they got off course for who knows what reason. And they ended up stranded on a place called Isaac's Rock. And the local people there from the Bahamas helped them out. They provided them with shoes and clothing. And upon their departure, because they got them on another boat, but according to the story, they gave $1 to each person. The group broke up as not only Frisians were on that vessel, but also other nationalities trying to get to the US. On June of 1853, they arrived in New Orleans, only to find that the captain of the William and Mary, who deserted them, took the lifeboats, left them there to die and drowned, had told everybody in New Orleans that the boat sunk and they were all dead. So at the end here, I'll take and show you one of the books I found, and it's actually written in 2017, and I got it from the library today, and it's called The Lost Story of the William and Mary. And it's written actually by, I think, somebody from the Netherlands. And he writes a lot of books about shipwrecks and stuff like that. But all of their belongings were left behind in the Bahamas, except for that $1 that they were given. So they ended up in New Orleans. And in New Orleans, the German society there, because they're part German or on the German border, helped to assist them and gave them actually $5.50 per family. Now, some left and stayed in Iowa as they were taking the boat up the Mississippi. And Davenport, Iowa has quite a large settlement at that point. But really that's sort of where he wanted to go. He wanted to go to Iowa or southern Wisconsin. So when getting to Prairie La Crosse, the story says, there were a few opportunities, and they found land initially in Minnesota and La Crescent Township to purchase. He did. The other ones didn't have much money. And eventually he bought 800 acres in Onalaska and Hamilton townships. Now those townships ended up later being included in the town of Holland. Town of Holland and the village of Holmen had not really been settled well yet at that point. Very few buildings were there. In New Amsterdam, from that first picture that I showed you with the plot of the property and the church, that was their first Presbyterian church. And really now that is the only surviving building. Epke and his brother were instrumental. They built many homes at one time. There were 200 homes in New Amsterdam. Epke also and his brother owned stores, hotels, bars, dance halls, which is a little unusual considering their Presbyterian religion. But it was a way to survive in that area. And then I said at the time of his death, his will left everything to his wife. Now, many of those people who came over on the ship, their descendants are still living in the New Amsterdam area. Chalsmas, Spanglers. It wasn't spelt that way when I looked at the ship's roster, but that is the family line that's still living in that area. Okay, let's move on to the Black family here. I'm checking the time. So a small amount of background information, first of all. Some of the people who are watching are descendants of the Blacks, and they probably know this story better than anybody because we all sort of have the same book that we look back on and pictures that were saved. But the first guy, Oleson, Oleson, he was born in 1797 and he died in 1872 on Amsterdam Prairie. He was married in the Ringsaker Church, as many of the Holmen people were at that time, because that was their community. He was married in about 1818. He and his wife and some of his children came 4 years after his son came. So what was that son, the oldest son's name also? Ole. So the church records in 1854 document their trip, and he is the oldest son, and he came first to the Holmen area. And then Oleson came second, and he is buried in Long Coulee Cemetery with his headstone, and it does say Oleson. Traveling was not hard for them really, other than Johanna, who is the wife, was sick most of the way and had a young child. So it certainly wasn't as bad as the Gordons or as bad as the Bonimas for trying to get here. His other children, Anders, Johannes, Marie, and Thomas Monson, they all were on the same boat coming over also. 3 additional children were born, but they did not survive. They're unaccounted for. And the person who is the historian who wrote the book that we followed, she really doesn't know what happened to them. And she's been back there to Norway. She has now since passed away, but she's been back there 3 times, searching for history. So why do you stick with one person for looking at a story? Well, because she's the one that has the most accurate data. And I say that it's most accurate because she, after the military, became a genealogist and worked for the state of Minnesota. So she has a historical background and the expertise to track down people. She compiled a book of about 190 pages to document the Oleson Black family. And it has lots of names in it, but it doesn't go up to current, of course. But many different branches, and of those people that are out there, I'm sure you follow that book and look back for the history. So prepare yourself to get confused again. So Oleson Black and Johanna had 12 children. And this is another reason why it's difficult to track a family tree. Had she not done all that work, it would be very difficult for us to do this program, to try and track everybody. Because also everybody got renamed. If a baby died, the next born male or female would have been named the same name. And you look in cemeteries and headstones have disappeared. Family members are no longer there. It's 5, 6 generations down, and nobody has repaired the headstones, and so they're gone. So although the information dates back to the 1700s with this Oleson, actually it goes back further than that. We're only going to just touch a little bit about their story of those that stayed here in the town of Holland. Ringsaker was a beautiful area. Why they left there was economy also. The first of the Black family then to come was Ole Black. Now, why wasn't it Ole Oleson? Well, when he got here, there were a lot of Ole Olsons. And he decided he would change his name to Black. Nobody did any legal documents then. And his wife's name was Johanna also. So where did they settle? Well, they left Norway in 1849. Their trip took about 22 weeks to get into Wisconsin. 14 weeks in the hold of a sailing ship until reaching New York. Then by boat across the Great Lakes to Milwaukee, they lived in an area that was called Koshkonong. I probably mutilated that one too, in Wisconsin, but you can see the map up on the screen. It's down by Cottage Grove, Stoughton, Madison area. It's a very large settlement of Norwegian immigrants. And it's about 20 miles south of Madison. They had to stop there, and they actually were there for a few years because they had to pay back the person who paid to sponsor them to come over. In the summer of 1851, they started out for the land that Ole had claimed in the town of Holland, on foot. No rides, on foot. And they had 2 children. They walked by compass, they followed the rivers, and finally came to La Crosse. Very few buildings were in La Crosse. Ole's parents and other siblings joined them, but about 4 years later. So where did the Black family settle? Well, this map here is from 1913. And I'm going to show you here that this is after they got here. But these are all descendants. Oscar Black, Olaf Black, and we are north of Holmen on Highway 53. For those of you who are from the area, you know where the Mellstrand farm used to be. It was a farm that sold produce out front, and that was the Black homestead. So we have Black here, we have Black here. This is a relative, Thomas Johnson, J.P. Johnson. Farm is over on Long Coulee. That's actually my husband's grandfather and great-grandfather. You have Hansons. Remember other Hansons? Martin Hanson, I had said before, of the 3 first families. And again, Kleinsmiths out here in Amsterdam Prairie also. So they're starting to settle. There's many more people that are in that area there. It was on both sides of Highway 53. And if you notice on these old maps, you see a little schoolhouse. And that little schoolhouse that was right there between 23 and 24 section was land that was given by the Black family for building the Amsterdam Prairie School. The Black family had difficult time traveling to America, but not as bad as others. So these pictures that I'm going to show you now, as we're sort of winding down here, were from copies from a glass slide collection that was found at the Fred Black house in Holmen. Because when Fred moved off the farm, isn't that what all farmers do, is they moved off town? And he did. And he changed his land to give it to his sons and stuff. And so that these here are very clear. They're clearer than the pictures we take now. But these are pictures that are made from the Black slides. The story tells of them first winter spending in a cave along the bluffs out of Holmen, up by King's Bluff, where the quarry is. They lived in a cave there for that first winter. The shelter that they first built was actually back closer to the hillside. And it was only 14 feet square, and it was made of logs. It had 1 window, it had 1 door, it had a fireplace, and Johanna had to use all of her belongings, which happened to be 1 kettle, I mean, you got to get the cow here. So you don't have a lot of room to haul a lot of other stuff because you didn't have oxen and wagons and things like that. And so this picture was in the collection. Is it the house? I don't know. I don't think so, but it looks like it's 14 feet square, one window, one door, and I thought it would be a good thing to put in here. They slept on a bed of leaves, and rattlesnakes were seen both in and out of the shelter. This is a picture of 4 generations. So the lady on the left, again from the glass negatives, is Johanna Black. Her daughter is Johanna Black Holset, and she's the other lady sitting on the bench. And she married a Holset from this area. The lady standing in the back is the daughter of Johanna Black Holset, and the little girl is her daughter Eva. So 4 generations. Now, when you look at this picture, where's the house? Is it out on Amsterdam Prairie? Well, I'll bet it is, because if you look in the back of the picture here, and that's exactly where I see a person's face, but I'm going to try and move that over here. Decorah Peak. So the prairie was not the same as it is today. So looking out of their yard, this is a pile of wood, and I don't know how large your screens are that you're looking at. But this, I believe, is Decorah Peak across the Amsterdam Prairie. And the river has to be in here somewhere. So it's really difficult to tell whose house that is. I mean, we know it's white, we know that it has some trim, it's got trees around it, but really, I don't personally know for sure that this is the Black homestead, which house. This land, let's see. When was this picture taken? Well, if you know the age of the people in it, you can sometimes guess. Glass negatives were used anywhere from 1890s to 1900s, early 1900s. So that picture had to come from about that era. And that little girl is the key, I think, to knowing. She was born in 1898, and she looks about 3 years old. So you can sort of start guessing a little bit, because is there anybody to contest that? Not anymore. Another one of the family pictures that I'm sure others who are watching this have also in their collection is dated, the one that I have in my husband's family collection is dated 1860. And it was written on the back that this was the Ole Black senior family. Initially, the family name was Oleson, as I said, and the name got changed to Black when they came to the United States. And it was the oldest son who changed his name to Gilbert Oleson Black. I said they gave land for the school. Here's a picture that was on those slides of the Amsterdam schoolhouse. Now, in front is actually a cornfield. And then the road, you can't even see where the road possibly is in front of this schoolhouse. It was probably nothing more than a dirt road. And that house, when the school closed, was actually moved out by the Holmen airstrip and was converted over into an actual living home out there. Most of the pictures are unidentified on these slides, unless any of the Black family who are watching can help me identify them. We'd love that if you could. So I don't know who this lady is. She's dressed quite nicely. And maybe she was one of the first teachers that came to that school. We don't know. The little sign above the school door says 1877. So that's when the school was started. Another picture, this was in the Centennial Book. Many people have this picture. It is the Oleson Black senior family again. And if you go from left to right, you have Bertina, Frederica, Annie, Johanna, Ole Sr., Ole Jr., Gilbert, and Anton. And that's the name that I had on the back of my picture. If you looked at the invite to this here program, I used this picture. This picture was taken at the house that Ole lived in, out by the Millstrand Farm. I know that for sure, but I have no idea who these people are. So this is one, please, if there's any Black relative that's out there that knows who these people are, I would greatly appreciate that. You can send it to my email address, bjohn7630@aol.com. AOL, yes, I'm old. The Blacks were farmers, they were carpenters, and they were expert carpenters. They built many of the barns in the area and many of the homes in Holmen proper. But they also found time for some fun and relaxing. So the thing that amazes me the most is, I'm gonna move my little picture, the baseball uniforms and the padding that they have. The other thing that's interesting looking at these pictures is you always have to look at the background. The background will help tell you where the picture was taken, if you know the area. So as we look over here to these 4 women and this young man that are sitting here eating watermelon, I wish there was a way that I could really expand this and make it big for you. But the farm that's in the back here is the Chalsma farm, up below King's Bluff, up the highway. Who owned the Chalsma farm? I'll tell you in a minute beforehand. They had bicycles and they dressed up a lot. Now, the interesting thing I saw here on this one, and only local people will know what I'm talking about, right up here on this picture down in the lower right, this little rock formation here, there's a big rock and a little one. That's known as the table and chair. And it is up there on the top of the bluff. And if you looked at any of the pictures of the first quarry that was up there that I did post out on the internet, you will see other pictures of the table and chair rock formation. And it's up along that ridge. So as we're sort of winding down here a little bit, the family farm, the tree branch, is kind of interesting to follow. So the Blacks owned not only that farm, but they also owned Chalsma's farm. They had other farms across the highway. They owned a lot of property in that area. The Black farm was a century farm. And so it was designated that when Fred Black lived there, as far as I understand. That was in 1952, and it received recognition from the state of Wisconsin. Now, not the whole farm, because being originally owned by Ole Black Sr., and in 52, it was owned by Fred Black, who eventually moved into Holmen, and he actually lived next to Andy's gas station. Hold your question. But the interview that was done with Fred Black really did not have specific dates. And it says that right in that newspaper clipping in that interview. Senior farmed the land for about 30 years. So that's kind of interesting. Then he divided it between his 2 sons. The portion that was taken by Ole Black was still in the family. And that's the portion that Fred Black took, the Millstrand farm. The other half was given to Gilbert Black and eventually sold to Howard Chalsma. but it also went to Gilbert's son Olaf before that, and then R.V. Nelson, and then ended up in the Chalsma family, which it is still in the Chalsma family. In 1911, Oscar Black's son Ole Jr., a brother of Fred, farmed and was the owner of the farm for a short period of time, 3 years, and then it got sold to Fred in 1914. He married Ella Berg. They had 2 children, Arnold and Eunice Irvine. Interesting name. And when Fred moved off the farm, he needed something to do. And so what he did was he built a replica of the farm. And that's what we want to show you now as we're winding down. That replica of the farm was actually given to us, donated to us by Lauren and Betty Amundsen Black. And Betty Amundsen was a Holmen girl herself. All right, so let's take and try and move this laptop, and I want to show you this farm and the detail that he has for it. So hang on, guys. Okay. Hey, don't go anywhere. All right. Now it's not me though. No. Oh, up here. But why can't I do the big one?
You are to that.
Oh, okay. All right. So let's take a look at what this farm looks like. And this is one of the best ways that we can do this at this point. So I think I'm gonna make you dizzy here, but we're gonna start with the house. So I think he had every single building. And my technical person is helping me here a little bit. All right. So look at the intricacy of this house that was built. And if you come to one of our future meetings, you'll be able to see it because Pam and I will set this up again for the first meeting where we are face to face. And then you'll have a chance to see it a little bit better. That back porch, that picture of the family that nobody's identified on is actually right here. Are you seeing it okay? Okay. That's where they were sitting. So I know that this here was the Fred Black farm. Now, as we look at the rest of the buildings that are here, it's kind of interesting, and I'm going to do this because there's the outhouse. Can you believe it? It's got 2 holes in it. This here building with the bell on top, probably to call the farm hands in, was actually the ice house, I believe. My husband told me that. If we come around the front here, we were always also given all of these little decorations to go with it. And look at that street light, the yard light that he built. Is it going okay?
Yeah.
Okay. The horses, the seed corn building, the windmill. That's not certainly the wooden one that was on those other pictures. And then all of the other buildings and the barn. Now we haven't spent a lot of time, my husband and I, cleaning this because we don't want to damage it. And so I believe a lot of the roofing, it appears, was sort of a tar paper shingle that he used for building it. And so it just naturally weathered as it came off the old buildings that are there. I hope this is working, guys.
It's really good, Barb. Yeah, you should see it on here.
Oh, neat. Yeah. Okay. So I think, well, we have a few minutes left. We actually did go over an hour. I figured I would. Those of you who know me, you know I would. Do you want to open it up for sound?
So you should be able to unmute them.
Okay, you can unmute yourself. I'm going to come back over. All right, who wants to talk first?
Almost like
Betty? Somehow our sound is not.
Which Betty?
Oh, yay. She's talking.
Yeah. Barb, you did a great job.
Thank you.
You did. It was amazing.
Yes, very interesting. Thank you both, Barb and Pam.
Oh, Lou, hello.
Hi.
Yeah, you guys did a wonderful job getting all of this information.
Well, you know, it came out of that book by Ella Holseth Johnson.
Yeah.
And you, a lot of you have that book, am I correct?
Yes,
Yes? What's your name?
Ted Wall. I'm
He's-
Betty's first cousin.
Are you the one that called me? No.
Nope, no, that's the other side of the family.
Oh, okay.
He's a wall.
All right. Well,
Hey,
do you
Barb.
have any special comments or anything? Was I pretty good with the history for the Blacks? Because there's a
Oh,
lot of
great.
people that are relatives.
Yeah.
Hey,
Bob's trying to
Barb, I
get
have
it.
a question for you, Barb.
Uh-huh.
This is Robert Black. I'm a long descendant of Ole and Johanna. And I teach these high school seniors every year. We talk about immigrants and part of it and history. And I have a chance to share my own story as I get them into their stories. But I'm curious about two things.
Okay.
One, in terms of the Bonimas and the Blacks and the other family, the
Gordon.
Gordon family, do you have any evidence about if they interacted or how they knew each other at the time?
Well, they certainly couldn't travel very well, could they?
Yeah.
I
So
mean,
they-
oxen or horses or by foot, but yet I was curious when I saw the name Irvine, whether or not it was from that family descendant.
Uh-huh.
You know, because then there would have been a mix between the Blacks and the Gordons. The Gordons lived just up the road from them. And in fact, they were their friends. And so I don't know how many people really interacted with the Bonimas, only because
Okay.
their dominant language was
Right, yeah.
Frisian, sort of a mix of German and Hollander. So I'm not sure. They tried to keep their language active.
That's one of the problems we have in the Black family today is that we have a hard time talking to each other because we don't know what each other is saying.
Robert.
Just one other question real quick, Barb. In terms of, I'm a pretty fair carpenter myself, and 45 years have been a licensed architect. And I really respect that work with the construction that my ancestors did. But do you have some records of, in particular houses? You said a lot of Holmen proper, or several in Holmen proper, or even La Crosse. Some of these, the Black family worked on those or put those together, the barns and the houses. Do you have any of that information?
One of the glass negatives that we have was of a church in La Crosse. And I know that Fred Black had worked to build that church. And not by himself, of course, but
Yeah.
you know, doing the woodwork and stuff like that for it. I also did read somewhere where he worked on Lutheran Hospital a little bit in constructing that.
Okay.
And a lot of barns. There's a barn up in Halfway that he must have built because that's one of the glass negatives. I can send you
Sure.
those pictures from the
That'd be great.
glass negatives. I'll have to see how many I can send at a time because when we had them created, we asked for a good resolution. And AOL, you know, doesn't really send.
I can send you a little flash drive and you can give it to Betty and she can mail it to me.
Oh, I
I
can
would do
buy
that,
a
Bob.
flash drive.
Hi, Barb, this is Kathy Black Boyle. I'm Robert's sister, and I just wanted to thank you so much for this presentation.
the
Just
picture she-
lovely to hear about our own family and others that were settling at similar times. And then Betty, my cousin Betty, I want to thank you for turning us on to this really
Yeah.
special. Many of our Black family relatives are on the call. Terry Scott, Bob Corky, Brian, Fran adopted into the family reunion, and who else? Brian, or not, well, Brian, I said you already, but I think my cousin who is in Bahrain is also on this call, or at least he was earlier. I'm sure I've forgotten somebody, but
And
a
Lynn
lot of
is
us
here.
wanted
Lynn
to join.
Simons is here, Kath. Lynn Simons.
Can I ask one question? How many of you have access to Ancestry.com? Do any of you have paid memberships with them? If you don't have a paid membership, many libraries in the area do have memberships.
Hmm.
Here in Holmen, we can go to the Holmen Library and log on to Ancestry.com and search for all kinds of trees that are out there. There are. Other of your relatives have put trees out there, but I will tell you that they're not all accurate. And they get a little testy when you tell them they're wrong.
You think?
You know? Betty, you know me. When I'm right, you know?
That's funny, Barb.
But
I'm just glad. I'm so glad you posted something in the newspaper so that I could send that to my two cousins, and then they reached out to the rest of their family.
Mhm.
the other thing is that I have a tree out there that has a lot of these pictures in it and stories in it. Because I traced back my husband's family.
Mm.
But I have over 11,000 names in it. And in that tree that I have out there, it is for those who are from around here, it's the Hausers, the Kleinsmiths, the Nestlers, the Taberts. Then you go the Johnsons, and then you go my mother-in-law's branch, and I have a forest. And you just, you can't stop. Somebody will say, well, can you trace my branch down? Or my son just got married. Will you look for his wife's branch? And you just keep adding.
Barb, this is Mary Dalby.
Hi, Mary.
Hi, thank
Hi,
you
Mary.
very much. We're totally, hi Pam. Thanks to both of you, totally enjoyed. But I will tell you that Bob Cottrell, I believe, told me that Mr. Black was the carpenter / architect for Grandpa Mike's McHugh's house. And I'm sure you probably know that. So
The
for this
first
job,
one now, Mary, or the second one?
I believe both.
Okay.
But Bob Cottrell knows that information, so Mr. Black, the descendant there, Mr. Black, may want to get that information. Maybe you
Thanks,
can get
Mary.
that.
Well, and we
Thank you,
actually
Mary.
have pictures that Mary has given to us of those two houses. The first one that burned,
Yes,
and then part of the property was where the first school in Holmen was.
yes.
And when I moved to Holmen from Milwaukee, she was my next door neighbor.
Yeah.
We went to high school together, yes. And Pam was with us too, so.
That's right.
Barb,
Yes,
There's Ted.
I
Hi,
find it
Barb.
so fascinating, the interconnections between families.
Mary McHugh is related.
I'm Wall and Josted, and you gotta say Helgeson too.
Yeah.
And there are things like 3 generations in a row, there's marriages and crosses between families.
I found that with the Hauser when I first started, because it was everybody in the coulee was intermarried, and I've looked at some pictures and I say, a little inbreeding there,
And Barb, another thing I'd like to share is that on the Norwegian side, the naming of children was very specific. There was a lot of thought behind it. And one of the main ideas behind it was they never wanted a name to die. So the firstborn son of a family was named after the father's father.
Uh-huh.
The firstborn daughter was named after the father's mother. And then it went, the second-born son would be from the mother's father's name and the mother's mother's name. And then if one of those child died, well, they didn't want the name to die, so they reused it. And that's where it gets very, very interesting. And you have to look in the church records carefully.
Well, let me tell you how interesting it gets. I'm also the treasurer for Long Coulee Cemetery. Betty, right?
Yep.
And trying to figure that one out.
And we've been there.
Yep, we've been there. Well, we're going to close. I thank you very much for joining us. There are some comments that are out here on the chat area. I know who they're from. And somebody asked Barb Larson, where do we keep the farm? It's been in a box in my house, and now it's over in our storage area. So it's safe, it's environmentally safe, but there's really no place to keep something that large.
Right.
When Lauren and Betty donated it to us, he found it in his son's garage attic. He knew about it. My husband, Jerry, saw it first when he was about 3 or 4 years old, and he was fascinated by it. When he was to their basement, to his workshop.
Probably played with it.
He wanted to.
Yeah.
But, so if you have more questions, you can get a hold of Betty Baird if you don't know my connection. Otherwise, you take a look at the Holmen Area Historical Society. We have a Facebook page and a group. I'd ask you to go to the page, and that way you can message me. And I'll share pictures. We want to keep these pictures alive through the Historical Society. So if you need some pictures, I'd like you to do that. Of those who have the pictures and have the book by Ella Holseth Johnson, I want you to take a look at the pictures of the houses that are out there that say that they are Ole Senior's house. I don't think that house is the one on the old Millstrand farm. Only because the hillsides are too close to it. I think it's the house on the Chalsma farm.
Yeah.
Because that sits way back along the hills. So I think there's some error in there, but there's error in every family. So thank you very much. We've run over here a little bit. If you have somebody who does not have access to the internet, but would be able to see it, we did record this and it's out. I don't know if you're watching it on Zoom. Some of you are maybe watching it on Facebook Live. We're live on there right now too. And thirdly, we'll have a link that I can put out on our Facebook page to take you there. A lot of options.
That's great, Barb. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Pam and Barb.
All right, bye guys.
Thank you.
Be well, you guys.
Great job.
Thank you.
So now with all these comments.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Nice meeting you.
You too.